You're welcome. And now has Nigeria, been fared, how has Nigeria fared this past 63 years of self-rule? Is that the cord? Is it that the cord of brotherhood is still existing amongst the country, Dashen? Are we asking, is it that the cord is still as strong as it is? How strong is that cord of nationhood that tied Nigeria together on the 1st of October 1960, 63 years ago? How far has the country gone in realizing its very huge potential in every aspect? Now, we'll begin this ride from one aspect of existence of this great concern, or that is of great concern to everyone, and that is security.
All right, still talking about security. Now, let us welcome security consultant in our midst today, Kabiru Adamu. He will be sharing his thoughts on how far Nigeria has actually thrived in the 63 years. Hello, Kabiru. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello, Dashen. My pleasure, and happy Independence Anniversary to both of you.
Happy Independence to you as well.
Right. And we have a lot to talk about this evening. Nigeria at 63, of course, we have a lineup of guests, including Kabiru Adamu, lining up to talk about things, areas of security, economy, rule of law, and of course, we'll be looking forward. My name is Kofi Bartels.
And I'm Dashen. Usman, thank you so much for joining us. Now, talking about the 63rd anniversary, Kofi, this is actually a day where a lot of Nigerians are supposed to be out there celebrating 63, Nigeria at 63. And, it's no small feat at all. But, coming out today, this morning, everybody was just going about their business. So it begs the question, are they really proud of being Nigerians? Are Nigerians proud of being Nigerians? Do they have trust in the leadership? And is Nigeria where it is supposed to be, even at 63?
That's a big question. Is Nigeria where it ought to be at 63? You know what? At 63, they say, and our guest will tell us more, that you're a full-blown adult getting ready for pension. Retirement, So we'll have time to look at all of that and, of course, to look at the president's speech. But we don't have too much time. Let's quickly move over to our guest, Kabiru Adamu. Kabiru Adamu, did you listen to Mr. President's speech this morning, or did you have the chance to go through it? You're here to talk about security. What did you take away from that speech as far as the security of the nation, past, present, and future are concerned?
When I read it, I unfortunately did not listen to it when it was broadcast live, but I got a copy and went through it. The major thing that I got from that speech is the president's reiteration of his commitment to ensuring security in the country. As it were, he ran on the platform of addressing security. And since he was sworn in fact, on the day he was sworn in, he reiterated that commitment. And then severally, during speeches that he had delivered, he would always remind Nigerians of that commitment, and he did not miss the chance to do so today again. He spoke about security, spoke about protection, reminded Nigerians that he's conscious of the provisions of Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution that speaks about security, protection, and guaranteeing the welfare, civil liberties of Nigerians. So that for me was the major takeaway. Of course, there are other soft component of security that the president spoke about, including political economy, the economy itself. He talked about how aware he is of the socio-economic hardship that Nigerians are going through and his commitment to address that. Of course, he talked about some components of the economy, which I know you probably talk about with other guests, but it is related to security, so I thought I would also touch on that. He talked about inclusivity, which is also one of the soft components of security, and also talked about the diversity that Nigeria represents, and his commitment to ensure that that inclusivity and diversity is reflected in its governance. He talked about those living with disabilities, talked about women. All of these are components of inclusivity that would, even though they are soft components of insecurity, they would definitely go a long way towards contributing to improved national security.
All right, Kabiru. Now, we know that President Tinubu actually inherited a lot of messiness, when it comes to security when he took over power. But he also said that he's going to look beyond the past benches, to bring an end to security. In your opinion, how well has, his administration fared so far, when it comes to insecurity?
I think it's too early. It's just 100+ days. And frankly, within that period, I think the major issue that has dominated everybody's mind is the election petition tribunal. As it were, that is not over. The judgments have been delivered, and I think at least 3 of the contending parties have indicated they will appeal those judgments. So I think it's a little bit too early to take a conclusion on where the Bola Tinubu administration stands on security. But we know that the prerequisites for addressing security have been laid down for us, and we're hoping that over the next few months, those are the things that we would see the administration implementing. And what are these things? So there are 3 documents that I'm going to cite, which are relevant to understanding the manner and the approach that the administration intends to use in solving insecurity. Number 1 is the transition document. You would recall that former President Buhari signed into existence Executive Order number 13, which provided for a delivery process to be implemented in governance. And as a result of that, he set up a transition council that was headed by the immediate past Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Now, that transition council brought in 2 persons who were members of this current government. One of them is the Minister of, I think, Minerals, Mr. Wale, and then the other one is the Minister of Budget and National Planning. That's the former governor of Kabiru State. They were part of that process. And the result of that process was that a compendium of documents was submitted to this administration. The second document is the Renewed Hope Agenda. That was the manifesto of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Shetima campaign group. Inside that document, they listed a couple of things they intend to do to address the insecurity challenge in the country. Then the third document was a policy advisory council that the president put up after he was sworn in. The mandate of that council was to bring together the first 2 documents I had mentioned and produce a roadmap, as it were, for the implementation of the various policies that the government intend to achieve. Embedded in that is also the security imperatives. Now, I'll quickly mention the security imperative from these 3 documents. Number 1, the president says he's going to renew the military doctrine and capabilities. In other words, the military approach to issues, and then, of course, the capabilities of the ministry. Embedded in that is the desire to improve the capacity of the military to address the security challenges. Just last week, the president approved for the army in particular to purchase 12 helicopters, something that we've been advocating for quite a while. So what I see is the president not just saying, but actually acting in that capacity. The other one is improving policing. Now, under improving policing, one of the things the administration intends to do is to bring together all the reform documents that have been pursued in the past. One of the most, I think, discussed one is the Rufai Reform Committee. There is a report, and then there are several other components of that report. Bring it together and then see how it can be implemented so that we can have a policing system that we can be proud of as Nigerians. Others include harmonization of the data capabilities within Nigeria. I'm sure you've discussed this severally. We've got different data platforms in the country. So they want to use NIMSI, which is the government agency for data acquisition, harmonize all the existing data into one place, and then several other components, about 7 or 9 of such agenda within these 3 documents. So to that extent, if we go by this desire, I would say the president means well. What remains to be seen is whether all of those elements will be implemented. And as you're aware, he has appointed cabinet ministers. He has appointed other positions, including the National Security Advisor. And in doing that appointment, it was a deviation from what we're used to as a country in the past. For the first time in our modern history, a non-military person has been appointed in that position. Also, if you look at all the cabinet ministers, none of them has a security background. So while that could be a challenge, and it is a challenge indeed, we are not sure how he intends to address that challenge. We are hoping that these individuals themselves realize that it is a challenge and appoint persons as aides who understand the security sector, who are able to advise them in a manner that puts them within the prism of what security sector stands to gain, especially in terms of national growth and national development. Now, the other element, which again we're waiting to see, is how he intends to use the security governance structures that our constitution provides for. We have a National Security Council, we have a National Police Council, we have a National Defense Council, and several others. We're waiting to see how this new administration intends to use these governing bodies for the purpose of security sector governance. So in a nutshell, it's a little bit too early, but the roadmap is there. And what we'll do, and what I'm hoping you two as the media would do, is to put pressure on the administration to ensure that these promises, as codified under these three documents that I've mentioned, that they keep to those promises. Now, how best do we do that? It is by introducing monitoring and evaluation. Now, and then we're hoping that the government on its own would do that. If they don't, then we as civil society organizations, as media, we should come up with our own ways of measuring the performance. And it's through monitoring and evaluation, use metrics so that we're able to say, in 2023, this is what has been achieved. In 2024, this is what has been achieved. That way, it would be impartial. The conclusions will be based on some figures, some metrics, and nobody would accuse anyone of being political about it. Lastly, with regards to your question, is the role of the National Assembly. The National Assembly is crucial in ensuring security sector governance and the achievement of the security imperatives. All the organizations that I've mentioned previously, they are under the executive arm of government. Now, for one reason or the other, they may decide not to perform, or they may be distracted by one thing or the other. The only part of government that can put them in order and make sure they perform is the legislative arm of government. First, through the laws they are going to make. Secondly, through the oversight function. And one of the worries, for us is the lack of capacity within the legislative arm of government. Most of the persons that have won, seats within the parliament are either freshers, or even where they're freshers, they lack security expertise. If you look at all the committees in the National Assembly that have been appointed in the 10th Assembly as chairmen of the various committees, none of them has any requisite security competences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so very interesting, and sorry for the interjection there, but you've given us a lot of food for thought. But I'd like to ask you, what would you say are the root causes, looking at the Nigerian national experience for the past 63 years, and maybe even before that? What will you identify, have you identified, are the root causes of insecurity in Nigeria? And, why haven't these root causes been addressed all this while? What do we need to do to address them, some of which you've already talked about?
With regards to root causes, I think the number one is our lack of social cohesion. As a country, we have ethnic nationalities that frankly have not grown into a nation, as it were. And that is reflected in different components. So you hear of marginalization, some of it real, others perceived, both in terms of economic, social, political marginalization. And what that means is that our threat elements would include both internal threat elements and local and international threat elements. They are able to mobilize and recruit from these aggrieved persons. You cannot have a strong, united, virile nation where social cohesion is below the global standard. And there is a very interesting institute, African Polling Institute, that releases a report on social cohesion almost on a yearly basis. And I urge our leaders to pick up that report and read it and identify all the things that institute has put forward, both in terms of the challenges to social cohesion and ways to go about improving social cohesion. So that's number one. Number two, is issues around our porous borders that allow weapons proliferation. Studies have been conducted to show that Nigeria is a recipient of about 70% or to 75% of the weapons that come into the region. And of the 10 million small arms and light weapons that were documented as far back as 2010, about 6.5 million were in Nigeria. And just to bring this down home, to us, what this means, especially if you now do the mathematics, our law enforcement agencies and some of us that are licensed to carry weapons that the Inspector General of Police or the President has authorized the carriage, if you total all of that, what we have is about 1 million weapons in place. Now, if you subtract that million, and in fact, if you want to be generous and give it, let's say 1.5 million, and you subtract it from the 6.5 million, what it means is that there's about 5 million, 4.5 to 5 million weapons in the hands of these non-state armed groups. And so if essentially you have a situation where the ratio of anyone who is licensed to carry a weapon and the person he is fighting is not at a position where there will be balance. And so it explains to you why threat elements are able to attack in the daytime, they're able to attack targets at will, and the capability of our security forces to prevent them is not as effective as it should be. Now, this is me being very basic. I know there are other components of weaponry that, for instance, the state has control of that the enemy. I was very particular when I said small arms and light weapons. So I'm not talking of, for instance, the airspace, that I don't think there's any non-state actor that has capability over that. Now, the other ones are socioeconomic issues. So for instance, poverty, unemployment, where, for instance, the last figures by the Bureau of Statistics said there are about 133 million Nigerians multidimensionally poor. Again, that is the driver of insecurity. From that 133 million, it's very easy to recruit from, or it's very easy to instigate them to carry out criminal offenses. Of course, climate change. Climate change itself, is a challenge. But what is even more of a challenge is the inability of the state and the government to address or introduce adaptability components to address the challenges of climate change.
Okay.
We are not.
Sorry to cut you off, Kabiru. Actually, you talked a lot about police, how they can be able to find an end to insecurity. But in the past, a lot of people have actually accused or fingered the police or some security agents as being part of the root cause when it comes to insecurity. Now, taking a look at the security architecture in Nigeria, now, do you think that we would be able to take adequate steps to be able to enhance greater security in the country, taking a look at all the accusations on ground as well?
Yes, no doubt. If I had concluded if allowed me to have concluded the list of elements that are the drivers of insecurity, I would definitely have mentioned the ineffective and inefficient judicial system. It is a driver of insecurity. People take their complaints to the judiciary or the judicial system, and they don't get any justice. And embedded in that judicial system are our law enforcement agencies. And so what people do is they resort to self-help. And that resort to self-help in itself is a driver of insecurity. But to address your question directly, there was a reason why we had NSAS. Youth were frustrated with the fact that they were being targeted by our law enforcement agents. And of course, we all know what happened. For about 11 days, the country was locked down over the protest. And at the end of it, the then president promised the reform. And true to his word, he did set up a committee. So today, there is an office called POTO. It's an acronym for PORTO, which is Police, I think, Reform and Transformation Office, something like that. And it is a product of that promise by the president. And they have a roadmap. A beautiful roadmap, actually, for transforming the police. So what worries me is our inability as a country to carry through with policy initiatives. A lot has been done with this POTO initiative, it resulted into a roadmap. And frankly, I'm not hearing that conversation in this current administration. So it seems to me that the entire process, all of the effort that has been done has been more or less probably thrown away. Now, that's not to take away from the current acting Inspector General of Police, who has come up with a lot of initiatives, some of them commendable actually. But my point is, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. If you've got a good thing, something that the international community, peace lovers, civil society organizations embraced, I'm talking of this Portway initiative now, there was no reason to have thrown it away. We could have looked at it, taken the good elements out of it, what we can implement, continue to implement. Again, I'm hoping it's just an oversight that, like we agreed earlier on, it's still early days of this administration, that they will dust up that no reform agenda, and then they will continue along that line. Well, having said that, in the Renewed Hope agenda, policing features prominently. And so it's very, very easy. It's a win-win for the president if he focuses on the desire to reform the police.
Kabiru, sorry to bring this up again. You have a lot to say, and that's quite interesting. But please permit us whenever we interject there. You've talked about the Renewed Hope agenda. You've talked about, the promises. Obviously, you've studied Mr. President's manifesto, and we hope that all these things will come to pass. But you also mentioned something. You said, we don't have a core security person or someone with a security background in the president's cabinet. That could be an issue. You said, you hope that they will, in the appointment of their aides, see the need to have people with security experience, which is quite important. You even talked about the National Assembly, equally important. But, Kabiru, it could be argued that over the past few years, at least since 1999, since the soldiers said, hey, we're going to give power back to the civilians and we're going back to the barracks where we belong, we've had it getting, it could be argued, worse and worse with the security or insecurity in Nigeria. And we've had tons of money, including loans. We can remember what happened to the loan, when the government took loans during Goodluck Jonathan's time. We've had a lot of breaches of security. When Buhari was president, you know what happened in Abuja, right there at Kuje prisons. You know what happened to the guards brigades. So does it follow in the Nigerian context that if you have security, people with security experience and background in the corridors of power, automatically will translate to a more secure Nigeria, looking at what has happened in the recent past?
Brilliant question, Kofi. I couldn't have put it any better. Let me give you a message to give President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I know you know him.
All right, maybe he's speaking prophetically.
This message will get to him. On a serious note, none of these persons or organizations on their own can solve the security challenge that Nigeria has. To solve the security challenge, we must be able to harness our national powers. When you asked me earlier on what the drivers of insecurity is, I didn't start with saying that the military lack enough equipment or lack enough training or capability. All of these are issues, but they're not the drivers of insecurity. The drivers of insecurity are the things that I mentioned. So to address them, to address insecurity, we have to address those drivers. And it is about harnessing our national power. And I was very happy during a speech, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when he went to the military training school in Kaduna, Jaji, he did talk about harnessing our national powers. Now I'm waiting to see how he intends to do that. Addressing social cohesion is an example. When you win the hearts and minds of the people, which by the way is one of the elements within the Renewed Hope agenda, he intends to win the hearts and minds of the people. People will be able to support your policies. People will be able to relate with what you're doing. And by doing that, you would have the requisite support for achieving all your objectives. Now, I'm starting with this point to explain that perhaps we should stop looking at individuals. Perhaps it's time for us to start looking at institutions. And in doing this, we need to go back to the Constitution. What is the security architecture as provided for in the Constitution? There are, depending on what you want to go with, between 27 to 29 ministries, departments, and agencies that have responsibility for security in Nigeria. And the reason why I say 27 or 29, customs are arguing that they are not a security organization. They are more on the financial side than a security organization. So depending on what you go, if you go with them as a security organization, then you 28 or 29, as the case may be. Now, embedded in that 28 or 29 are the security governance structures. I mentioned them earlier on. National Security Council, National Defense Council, National Police Council. In the past administration, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari invested massively in security. In fact, at a point, there was no sector in the country that received as much budgetary provision as security. And that is even at the federal level. By the time you add the contributions of the states and other subnationals to the security budget, you find that the security was taking the highest portion of our budget. But where did it take us to? Frankly, nowhere. And the reason is this: we abandoned significant elements of the Constitution. How many times did the National Security Council meet? In fact, we've had inspectors generals of police appointed without the National Police Council sitting in this country, and everybody kept quiet, including the media. So harnessing our national powers would mean even the media would be aware of these things that I'm saying, and where there are deviations, the media will speak about it, so that everybody is able to contribute to the achievement of that security.
Quite interesting point you've raised. The second time you mentioned the media, so it means we have to take note. But we have to leave it at that, Kabiru. And we thank you so much for your time. We know we'll have more opportunities to have you on our programs to enjoy your expert analysis as always.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy.